Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. We're going to get started in just a minute here. Seeing everyone join in the participant section. So as you're joining, I do want to note the chat function does work, and all of your questions and comments come directly to the presenters. So if you have questions throughout our session tonight, please feel free to post them, and we'll be sure to get back to them at the end of our session if they're general for the group, and then certainly get back to you personally for any specific questions to your family. I'm going to start in one more minute. Okay. Welcome, everybody. I am Emily Hurst. I'm the Executive Director of Philadelphia Hebrew Public. Many of you we've gotten to meet over the past few years, and so I'm excited to see you through the screens and hopefully see you in person soon. And for those of you who I have not been able to meet yet, I cannot wait to meet you in the weeks and months to come. We are so grateful to be here and to have this time together. We know it's a tremendously difficult time. We hope you are healthy, that you're safe, and you've even found a bit of joy and perhaps some restoration this summer as well. We are excited to share our plans with you for the fall and really our rationale and how we arrived at these plans with your input and with input from our team. Before I get into things, most importantly, I want to introduce our phenomenal head of school, Elissa Yun. Just give a little wave, Elissa. Awesome. You'll be hearing a lot from Elissa in the next few minutes. So jumping into our agenda tonight, pretty straightforward. We want to get right to the meat of things and tell you what you can expect on our reopening plans. We'll address some of the questions that you've already submitted, so thank you to so many of you who have submitted questions to our info account. And then we'll take some time to answer the questions that we see coming through the chat as well. We really want to share our rationale on how we arrived to this model, and then give you a taste of the day in the life too. We're certainly going to go through our health and safety plan and approach to how we're handling health and safety in our building. So for introductions, in addition to myself and Elissa, we've got some key members from our network team here, the Hebrew Public Network based in New York. First and foremost, we've got John Rosenberg, our President and CEO. Give a wave there, all right. Emily Fernandez, our Chief Schools Officer. Hi, Emily. And then Jonathan Worley, our Chief Operating Officer. So you'll get to hear from the whole slate of folks tonight. And now I'm going to turn it over to John, our CEO. John?
Emily, thank you, and good evening, everyone. I hope, as Emily said, that everyone is well and healthy during what we know is an incredibly difficult time. Many of you are familiar with our mission and our values as an organization, and what I particularly want to emphasize is that over the last few months, we have worked extremely hard to make sure that everything that we do, every decision that we make is grounded in these values around communication, around being a learning organization, around problem solving, and around doing everything we can to make a difference in the lives of your children. Those values have really informed us during this time, and I think have prepared us, as well as any organization out there, to provide appropriate services to your children. If I can get the next slide, please. So, one of the things that's really important to recognize in a key part of how we think about safety and how we think about what's the right next step for our school and for your children and for our staff and for each of your households is looking at the context in terms of data, health data around the efforts to combat the coronavirus in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania specifically. And the state, which has issued fairly comprehensive guidance over the course of the summer, recently issued some additional guidelines. For those of you who are joining us on video tonight on the Zoom link, you can see this chart in front of you. There are a couple of numbers I want to call out in particular that the state appropriately is focusing on. One of those is what's called the incidence rate, which is based on the last week or so, the number of people for every 100,000 residents of Philadelphia who are estimated to currently test positive for the coronavirus, who are estimated to have it. And the second is the positive test rate over the last period of days, which is as the city and the state expand their testing regimen, it's the percentage of those tests that come back positive. If we could get the next slide, please. Based on those data, with a current estimated incidence rate of about 39 people per 100,000 residents, and a positive test rate that's a little bit above 4%, the recommendation for the state is that our school and all schools in Philadelphia either be providing a blended learning model, meaning some days in school and some days home, or a full remote model. And for us, we want to ground that in some additional context for you about what's happening more broadly in the city. So the School District of Philadelphia, as many of you know, made a decision that it will launch fully remotely through, I believe, mid-November, roughly. And there are a lot of reasons, I'm sure, that informed that decision. A couple hundred schools in the district, lots of old buildings, et cetera. For us, our hope, as you'll hear in just a minute or so, is to be able to reopen on a hybrid model, on a limited basis, sooner than that. We are a single charter school in a private facility supported by the network operations team, of which Jonathan Worley, you'll hear from later, our chief operating officer. And we've been hard at work since the spring to ensure that a range of safety protocols and health measures are in place so that for those families that believe that is the right option for them, that we hope to launch our full remote program by October 16th. That deadline, which is our current plan for what we hope to do, because of course the health situation on the ground can change, that current plan is necessary for us to really make sure that staff are fully trained around all health and safety protocols, that your children and you are able to be adequately informed about those measures, that our building work around things like ventilation systems and furniture and signage and all of these new requirements that you'll hear about, that all of that can be in place in a comprehensive way so that we maximize the health and safety procedures and the readiness of the building to receive your children. So let me hand it back, Emily, to you to walk us through what we think some of the upcoming key milestones will be.
Yeah. Thanks, John. So as we shared last week, and John just outlined really nicely, this is where we are in terms of hoping to open as responsibly and nimbly as possible. So our commitment to you is to launch on our original date on August 31st through September 4th, but start that first week with a student orientation. We're going to be sharing a lot more detail about that with you today. So Elissa will share what you can expect, and then you'll be getting specific information by the end of next week for you and your family. We'll then launch for 6 weeks with an entirely remote program. So September 8th to October 16th will be fully remote. But by Friday, September 11th, we will let you know if we are able to accommodate limited in-person options for specific students. And so John's going to get a little bit more in detail into what that could look like for our students with more complex needs. We will also let you know by October 1st if we are able to transition back to a hybrid model by October 19th. And so we really want to be communicating with you clearly and give you a few weeks in anticipation of any shifts. And so this is our outline. We'll return to this at the end of this presentation, and we'll also follow up with an email with these key dates so that you have them to reference moving forward. John, will you take us into sharing a little bit more about this limited in-person option?
Absolutely. So first I want to say all of this is, of course, a lot more complicated and a lot more challenging, not just for the school, but we know for you, around issues of childcare, around concerns about your children's education and socialization, families needing to return to work. We really do understand that. We have parents among our staff. I'm a parent, Emily Fernandez, others, and we're dealing with across the schools that we serve a real sense of how hard this time has been. In looking at which students we might be able to bring in a little bit earlier than others, we have made a tentative decision to try to prioritize limited in-person services for 3 groups of students for whom the absence of in-person service delivery at the school has the potential to put them at higher risk than the rest of the student population. That includes students with disabilities, so students who have IEPs where the need to deliver some of those services in person can be a tremendously important part of those students making progress. Similarly, students who are learning English as a second or third language, for whom the delivery of English learner services can be particularly important. And finally, those members of our school community where the children in the households are experiencing homelessness. We hope to make that decision in a way where we'll be able to serve those families somewhat sooner than the rest of the student population, and we'll be in touch with you about that by Friday, September 11th. If I can have the next slide. Oh, there it is. Thank you. So as I said earlier, to put all this in context, we understand that for a number of our families, and some of you on this call tonight, that even waiting to October 1st or till October 16th to have the possibility of your child coming in is really difficult. We, above and beyond everything, want to make sure that we can serve your children in person in a responsible way. And in doing this, our current plan is to bring children in at least a month before the School District of Philadelphia would be doing so, and earlier than most of our peer organizations in the charter school sector would be doing so. We're trying to do that not because we want to behave irresponsibly, but because we think that we can do it. And we'll make those decisions based on the health data on the ground, and the team here in Philadelphia will be communicating with you about that. In addition, while it's not up here on the slide, I do want to make clear that we're also going to do our best to connect families with school-age childcare programs, so that if you're in a kind of situation where a parent or guardian or adult member of the household has to go to a place of work, and where the remote option that we're starting with just isn't feasible, we're going to do everything that we can to try to connect you with those providers out there that are providing school-age childcare services. More to come on that as we develop those partnerships. Okay, I'm going to hand it over to Emily Fernandez, our Chief Schools Officer, to give you an overview of our academic planning for the upcoming school year.
Great, thank you, John, and thank you everyone for being here with us tonight. I'm going to introduce myself again. My name is Emily Fernandez. I am the Chief Schools Officer for Hebrew Public, and I work closely with all of our school leadership teams, including Philadelphia, our team at Philadelphia, and also manage the long-term academic vision and strategy for the network. So before I turn it over for a deeper look into the day-to-day life of a child attending PHP this fall, I wanted to share just big picture what some of the key aspects we've learned and that we are incorporating into all of our academic programming across all 4 schools. So the first thing I would say is we are clear that there has to be a tight alignment of curricular materials and assessments between our remote programming, our soon to come hybrid in-person programming, and all of the new platforms we've begun to work with. So we have long worked with Eureka Math, for example, and now we are working with Zern as well, an online learning platform that complements that curricular component. Similarly, we're bringing in other online learning platforms, Amplify, Epic, all of which are aligned and will result in both students having the most access and engagement as possible now, but also being able to transition back into a more traditional learning environment in the future. We know we have to plan for now and for 6 months from now and from a year from now, and we don't know what that holds. So we want to make sure there's alignment and that transition is feasible and seamless for kids and families. We also know that connections are incredibly important. They've always been important. We know that family partnership is key, but in this time of social distancing and potential isolation, we know that focusing on that, keeping morning meeting as a key component, along with many other aspects, is crucial. And so we've devoted time and planning to that. I think we also are well aware, and anyone who's following the news sees this consistently, that technology access, be it laptops or iPads or Wi-Fi access, is educational access. And so, we're committed to making sure that that access is there for all of our families in Philadelphia, as well as all of our schools across Hebrew Public. And Emily Hurst will speak a bit more to that, just the intentional planning around what technology access looks like. And now the last piece I would say is just that, which you'll learn a great deal more in the next few slides, intentional scheduling is critical. Critical for students who we know learning in this way through a screen is new, and we have to be thoughtful about where live synchronous learning happens, where asynchronous platform learning happens, where breaks and mental breaks from the learning structures happen, as well as for families. We understand that families they are always our partners in educating our students, and right now you all are that much more of a key player in your students' day. And so Alyssa's going to take us through some schedules and what it looks like for a student and a family on a day-to-day basis, but we really do know that intentional scheduling is critical. And so you'll see places where we've included online learning platforms. You'll see places where we've included scheduled breaks or intentional independent work. And you'll see a lot of places where we've included live structured support, because for our youngest children, live structured support is going to be most effective to help them engage from afar. And so that's going to be true across all of our components, be it Hebrew, which we are absolutely maintaining and very excited about what our Hebrew and Israel studies component is going to look like, be it math or number stories where kids get to explore, complex problems, or foundations where kids are literally learning the building blocks of how to read. And so, Alyssa, I'll turn it over to you to take a deeper dive and help our families see what this looks like for an individual child.
Thank you, Emily. And I'm just looking through the participants now, and it warms my heart to see so many of you who we have missed so dearly over the past few months. And then to our families who are new, welcome. We cannot wait to meet you in person. So I want to pause before we jump into a day in the life and just define some terms that you heard from Emily and that you will also see some more as we discuss and roll out our remote learning. So when we think about remote learning, there are two terms that we think through: synchronous versus asynchronous. And so we are going to be using both of those options in our remote learning program. So in this first image, you'll see a sample of synchronous learning. What that means is that teachers and students meet on Zoom together at the same time, and that learning is happening in real time. The second image you see here right below is an image of asynchronous learning, and that is a pre-recorded lesson from a teacher where students are able to learn on their own time. So this is a picture of Miss Hanrahan, one of our first grade teachers this past year, with a pre-recorded read aloud that students were able to watch and then complete an independent activity at a time that worked best for them. Can I have the next slide, please? So I want to first open with a preview of what you can expect during student orientation, which we are really excited about. Families will have the chance to come to school on a staggered schedule to meet their teacher, receive their students' virtual schedule. They'll have a remote learning pouch that they'll receive, and then also to get set up with the technology they will need to participate in classes the following week. So for our new students who are in kindergarten, this is their first schooling experience. This is going to be a little bit more robust, including a chance to learn about our school and see our building, knowing that it will be the first time they are physically in, not only in our school, but a school in general. So as mentioned on the previous slide, during that week of August 31st, students will receive a remote learning package, and I wanted to preview what you can expect to receive. So they'll each get a remote learning pouch. In that pouch, there will be a little card with zones of regulation. It's an how I feel card. Students are going to need that card as teachers are using a system to check in with kids and teach them how to talk about feelings. That is a part of our program that would happen in class and at school. And so for those families who are already a part of our community, you know that Peace Corners are a really big part of how we support kids in regulating their feelings. And so we want to support you all in having a system set up at home that teachers will reinforce. You'll also receive a little card that says virtual rules for global citizenship, just reminding students of school rules. As much as possible, we want to replicate a structure and systems for you at home that kids would have received at school. One, because we know that structure is important for learning, and two, it will support students in a transition if and when we do shift to a hybrid model. So we want to ease that transition as much as possible. Additionally, they'll receive a printout of their schedule. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about parent partnership in a couple of slides, but these are all tools that you can use to set students up in feeling more prepared for school. In terms of academics, we will be sending home some Foundations resources. The Foundations program is our program where that we lean on to teach phonics instruction, so all of those super important foundational reading skills. So that will be going home with students, as well as Eureka worksheets. Eureka is our math program. So students will receive both synchronous and asynchronous, so live and pre-recorded math lessons. We also know it is really important for kids to get independent practice. That is where they learn how to work through struggle. It is also where they learn and have opportunity to practice new skills. You'll also be receiving some math manipulatives, some cubes, and especially in our youngest grades, really important for kids as they build foundational math knowledge. And then lastly, we want all of our students to feel welcome. So they'll receive a welcome letter from their teacher where their teacher will just share a little bit about themselves to start to build those relationships. So now shifting into what the school day will look like, what you can expect in the first couple weeks of school. Our kindergartners will begin their school day at 8 a.m. and their day will end at 2:40. For our first and second grade students, again, they will start their day at 8 a.m. Their day is slightly more extended to 3 p.m. All of the instruction, as Emily shared, that students will receive in our remote learning program is completely aligned to the curriculum we use at Philadelphia Hebrew Public, which we are really proud and excited to be offering, knowing that when it comes time to transition back to school, we will be keeping pace with some of those learning skills and target skills that students would have received in person. We'll also be providing special education services in our remote program through case management support and the provision of related services. So if you have a child who is eligible for those services, you can expect our wonderful special education coordinator, Miss SJ, to be reaching out to you if she has not already shortly to create a plan on how we determine continued eligibility for special education services as your child transitions to school age. Additionally, we are going to be working really closely with all of you to make sure that all families and students have the necessary technology and access to internet that they will need to engage fully in our remote learning program. As a note, we are working on our attendance policy. I know a few of you have reached out to ask about this. You can expect to receive that shortly as our network continues to stay up to date with state guidance. Right now, we are asking that families participate in as much of our remote learning program as possible because we know this foundational learning is so essential to student success as they get older. Next slide, please. So here is a sample schedule for a kindergarten student. So again, first and second grade, slightly extended day, but what you see here is something similar to what you can expect for any of our students across K through 2. Just as we would in school, we will be starting and ending our day with morning meeting and closing circle. So this is a time when students have the chance to build community with their classmates and also just bookend their day to create, again, some more structure for them. To support students in transitioning from their classes, there is a 5-minute break built in between classes, which is a new piece that we're adding to our remote learning program this year. We hope that students use this time to get up, get a drink of water, maybe just take a quick walk to another wall and then come back, or even just take a quick stretch before joining their next class. As you can see here, there's a mixture of both synchronous and asynchronous classes. And in some cases, a class might begin synchronously. So it might mean we start live with your teacher, the teacher provides a small mini lesson teaching kids what to do, and then releasing them to do independent reading. And so what that might mean is a child just turns their camera off, or maybe they go to a comfy place in their home to do that independent reading, and then they come back. And then another thing here that we want to highlight is an hour chunk in the day, in the middle of the day, which is our lunch. We did this really intentionally to try to split up the day so it feels like there is an AM portion of school and there is a PM portion of the school, similarly to how students would experience that here at Philadelphia Hebrew Public, where our lunch and recess blocks split the morning and the afternoon. And I apologize, there's one more thing that I want to highlight here with the schedule. Something that we have been thinking through really thoughtfully for students to have a robust kind of experience that reflects what they would at school is we want to make sure that they have opportunities for small group instruction. So just as students would have a small group reading at least once a day with their teacher or their associate teacher, this mixture of both synchronous and asynchronous learning allows us that flexibility to pull a small group on certain days when other students are working independently. So that is a part of our model that we are really excited to share. Next slide, please. And then before we shift to talking about health and safety, we want to talk about parent partnership. We are so fortunate to work with so many wonderful families. And you know, there's a number of reasons why we miss you all, but we really consider ourselves lucky. And we also know that this school year presents really difficult and unique challenges. And we're just grateful not only for our families who were with us this past year, but families that have chosen us for you all to be part of our community as we continue to grow. We also know that you know your child best. And we are going to be seeking your support in whatever ways you know that your child will need. So to support our community building, we have our virtual rules for global citizenship. For our returning families, these will be familiar. You will recognize them from some of our fun social media challenges. And then for our new families, we're really excited to share these rules with you. Our students will be taught these rules in the first couple weeks of school, and you will notice in teachers' language that they will be reinforced and encouraged because just as we do in school, we know that that repetition is really important for kids to learn them and for them to be bought into those rules as a part of our community. The number one rule we are asking for support with from you is the first one, which you'll see there says, I am ready to learn. It can be really challenging to work from home, which I know I have experienced, a number of folks on this panel have experienced, let alone learn, right? We are with partners and children and shared family homes, and so we absolutely understand that challenge. We are suggesting that you all have a designated workspace at home just to build predictability. And this can be working in a quiet corner. It could be working at a table. I know a number of our families last year used parts of their kitchen. Anywhere that in your home that is going to be a predictable space for students that has as few distractions as possible. So yes, we know that this can be a challenge in shared spaces. And so that's why we say as few distractions as possible, because we recognize that no distractions is likely not a possibility. And in addition to having a workspace that's predictable for students and for families, a lot of input that we heard from families last year that I wanted to share with you all is that uniforms have been really helpful to them. So we had families share with us, hey, can my child still wear their uniform in this remote program, because it's helpful in creating a space that feels like there is structure. And so we are encouraging families to still lean on our uniform policy. And if there is a situation where you are not able to access uniforms at this time, that is totally okay. We just ask that you remain grounded in the idea of being prepared for school. So being dressed for school and just getting your day started to help students feel like they are in an environment where they can learn. And so I'm going to transition to health and safety right now. And so we just walked through a pretty quick day in the life for your child. And I just wanted to take the opportunity to name that above all, health and safety comes first. As a principal, I take this very, very seriously. I take this personally. I did so before COVID and even now more so. And we miss our students and families so much, which I know that I already shared. And while I know that I so desperately, and so many of you so desperately want to be back in school together, opening as safely as possible is essential for all of us to make sure that kids can learn when we are in school. The health and safety of our teachers, our support staff, and our families and students are our #1 priority as we plan for reopening in a way that is as safe as possible, given the information that we have and we continue to receive both from the state and then locally. So now I'm going to hand it over to Jonathan Worley to do a deeper dive on the specifics of our health and safety plan. I know that he and his team have been working and leading this planning in this department for the past 5 months, and we are really grateful for his leadership and partnership in this area.
Great. Thank you so much, Alyssa. As Alyssa said, I'm Jonathan Worley. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at the Hebrew Public Network. I'm so happy to be here with everyone tonight, and thank you all for joining us for this. Health and safety, I'm going to talk about now. And as Alyssa mentioned, the health and safety of our staff and students is really our absolute top priority this year. I can say that I am personally committed. Our network operations team is committed, and the leadership and operations folks at your school are fully committed to reopening our schools with the best possible practices in place, and in order to ensure the safest environment we can create. We have been, as Alyssa said, over the past 5 months or so, carefully following all the information that is coming out about COVID, how to best create healthy and safe environments, regulations that are coming out of federal, state, and local agencies, including the CDC, departments of health, local school districts, as they're released. And the new information even came out today, and we're going to update and consider all of that. And we have been researching and reviewing best practices, working with peer networks, working with outside experts to make sure that we're putting in place what we see as the best practices. And of course, we're listening to the needs of our staff and our families. And with all that in mind, and to that end, we have framed a lot of the health and safety thinking that we've been doing around this guiding set of principles. So I'm going to go over briefly kind of what these are, and then get into a little detail on some of the things that the ways in which we are going to be putting these principles into practice, and in which we already have, in fact, put them into practice in the school setting. Just as a note, we're doing a lot of this work for our entire network, and this school has the advantage of we are anticipating opening our New York schools a little bit earlier, and so we will have the experiential background there as we open the school. So that's an added bonus for this school. All right, so the guiding principles that we are using to inform the work we're doing, a lot of these are hopefully familiar to all of you. Social distancing is the first. You should all probably be familiar with social distancing if you go to a grocery store ever, things like that. Use of personal protective equipment, or PPE, which refers to masks and gloves. Health screening, particularly with a focus obviously on coronavirus. Cleaning and disinfection. And environmental management, which here refers to air, ventilation, airflow quality. And I'll speak a little bit more about that. Okay, Roger, we can go to the next slide. So how are we going to be putting those principles into practice, and how are we doing that already in the school? I'm going to walk through some of the examples of what we are currently thinking. Again, as guidelines change, as regulations change, we may be making updates, but these are the fundamental approaches we're planning to take at this point. For social distancing, we are requiring that everyone in the school maintain a 6-foot separation at all times. That means outside of the school as people wait to come in, that means in the hallways, and that means in the classrooms. And in fact, we'll be setting up classrooms in ways that will allow for that when we go to live. Meaning desks will be separated at 6 feet, things like that. In order to enforce that, we're also going to be working on transitions like arrival and dismissal, in setting them up in ways, creating structures that allow for us to social distance. And so that will mean staggered arrival, staggered dismissal, things like that. And finally, and these things are already being put in place, we'll have signage all over the building, reminding people about social distancing, reinforcing that, saying this is how far you need to be apart, potentially having stickers on the floor to help with flow, as we already have in the building in some areas, and telling people where to stand to keep distance. For PPE, this is going to be one of our most important requirements, is that everyone in the school, everyone who enters the building, will be expected to wear a face mask at all times. There are exceptions to that, of course, and we recognize that it may feel challenging for students to maintain that. The exceptions, of course, during meals, kids are, of course, allowed to take off their masks. And if there are medical conditions that might require someone to not wear a mask, we'll deal with those and consider those on a one-off basis. In addition, so the expectation generally is that folks will arrive at the building with a mask: students, staff, visitors, vendors, anybody. If someone arrives, doesn't have a mask, they forgot it, they lost it on the way, the office will have extra PPE inventory on hand, so there will be disposable masks on hand. We're also creating hygiene kits for the various rooms in the building, so they will have additional gloves, masks, cleaning supplies in every space. And hand sanitizing is another important part of this approach. We will have hand sanitizer stations established throughout the building, particularly with focus on transition points. So at doorways in and out of the building, doorways to the bathroom, and in every classroom. And there will be general expectations around cleaning, hand sanitizing, or hand washing when people do transition from one space to another. Next, symptom screening. So one of the things that we are going to do, in addition to the physical changes that we're making, we are going to be screening everybody in the building in one way or another for symptoms of COVID. The first, and this is something that we're finalizing now, and we'll have details coming out as it becomes, as we get closer to live learning, we are going to ask staff and students to answer symptom screening questions on a daily basis. We will have, this will be an easy process. It will be prompted by email or text every day. And it's a matter of answering a few questions that are screening for symptoms. This allows us to make sure that everyone is feeling okay and is ready to come into school, hasn't had exposure that may be of concern. In addition, we're going to be doing no contact temperature checks for everyone who enters the building. That is our current plan. Currently, the thinking is that if someone registers 100.0 degrees or higher, we will ask that they don't enter the building. Of course, if it's a student who is there without a parent, we will refer them to a nurse and contact the family to pick them up. And then, in addition, all staff, as they're always expected, will be aware of symptoms of any sickness, and will be able to refer to a nurse if a student is showing potential symptoms. And speaking of the nurse, last year we had a nurse on part-time This year we have contracted to have a nurse on full-time in the building at all times. Cleaning is another really important aspect of our approach to health and safety. We have contracted with a new custodial service, and we are going to be working with them to ensure that they focus their daily cleaning on high touch and high traffic areas. And in addition, we've just purchased some new advanced disinfection equipment that'll allow us to do disinfection on a daily basis, and with depending on how the schedule goes, when we have fully remote days, we'll be able to do even more high touch disinfection. But the idea being that every evening we will be able to disinfect every surface in every room in the building. And in addition, we're going to ask staff and students even to assist with cleaning of their spaces in the school when they are in live instruction, wiping down after meals and things like that. And finally, and one of the more important things we can do for health and safety right now, we have a strong focus on environmental management. We recently had an engineering review done of the building to determine air quality and HVAC, that our HVAC system, our heating and cooling system are sufficient. And the good news is they're in fine working condition, and we do have good systems. The better news is we have gotten some advice on ways to improve airflow, to improve air cleaning, to improve draw of fresh air from the outside. Some of these improvements are already in place or are underway. And so that's exciting that the air quality is going to be even better. It is already even better. In addition, we're exploring installation of some additional systems to put on top of that in addition to pulling in fresh air, moving air in a good way, will be cleaning the air. And so that we're excited about that prospect as well. Another item that we already have in some of our rooms is this classroom level air systems, UV light and filtration systems. So we're really focusing heavily on ensuring that the air quality and the airflow in the building are good, sufficient, and the calibrations are right to do as much as we can to prevent against the possibility of virus spread. Okay, we can go to the next slide. And so one of the questions that comes up a lot, and I want to just quickly address here, is when we go live and when we have students in the building, what happens if someone tests positive? And the simple answer to that is, if someone tests positive, we are going to be following guidance from state and local health departments, and we will be in compliance with that completely. At this time, what that means, and these things will evolve potentially, but we will immediately be notifying the Philadelphia Department of Public Health. That is a first stage requirement. That will lead to their processes around contact tracing, and they will give guidance on what we will be doing in the school, and we will be in immediate compliance with that. The potential outcomes of someone or multiple people in the school who do test positive for COVID is that we may be guided to temporarily shift some students, or even a whole classroom, or in the case of a greater outbreak, maybe the entire school, to remote learning for a period of time. And again, this is not a decision we'll be making based on what we think is right. This is a decision we'll be making based on the strong guidance we're getting from these official agencies. Of course, we'll also always be working to have strong, clear communication with families to the extent that we can. So if it's a positive case, we will make sure that communication doesn't violate any confidentiality, but we will be in touch with everybody. And with that, I think I'm going to hand it back over to John Rosenberg for a couple more comments.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'm actually going to hand it to Emily Hurst, who our fearless executive director, to walk through what some of the next steps are for your family with respect to the school. Emily.
Great, thank you. Passing of the baton here. And Jonathan, thanks for running through this. As Elissa shared, as we've all shared, this is one of the many things that has kept us up, and we've had many sleepless nights since March 13th and before that. And we take this tremendously seriously for our beloved team, the extraordinary folks who are serving your kids every day, and for our kiddos who we're here for. So most importantly, what comes next for you? Tomorrow, Mr. Jones, I saw your message. You will receive a calendar and you will receive a recording of this presentation. So you can go back through and get a snapshot of the schedule and really anchor in on all of these dates as you make plans with your family. The calendar will also be posted on our website, so you'll have access to that as well. By next Friday, August 21st, you will receive information on family orientation. So for families that will be in kindergarten, that will be a specific time slot where you will come in on a staggered schedule and you can receive all of that wonderful stuff that Elissa talked about. And importantly for all families, this will be when you receive your technology. So we are super grateful and proud that we've been able to switch to entirely one-to-one technology school where every child will receive a Chromebook. So if you are a family who had a Chromebook from the spring, you can continue using that. If you are having challenges with that computer, we have a tech team in place to support you and either swap it out or fix it. If you are a returning family from the spring who did not have a Chromebook, you will receive a Chromebook during family orientation. And if you're a new family, you'll receive a Chromebook then. What's special about these Chromebooks is they're going to be pre-programmed with all of the tools that you'll need to access our remote learning platform. And so that's why it's really helpful to have a standard tool that kids can use. Then we'll dive into things. And so by the end of family orientation, we really hope that you are equipped with both your learning pouch and all of the materials Elissa reflected on, and the technology, including internet access, to dive into instruction the next week. As many of you have maybe seen, Philadelphia has partnered with the school district, corporate partners, philanthropic partners to make a big push to make sure every family has access to reliable internet. And so I just want to thank you all for filling out that survey. We are actively analyzing all of that data. And for families who do not have access to reliable internet, we will be in touch with you to figure out how to make sure that you do have access either through our own programs that we're connecting with Comcast and Internet Essentials on, or through the city program and a longer term strategy there. By the end of our first week of instruction, so September 11th, we will let you know if we can provide and the date by which we will provide in-person option for students with disabilities, our English learners, and students experiencing homelessness. And then by the end of October, we'll let you know our plans at that point for either shifting to an in-person hybrid option or continuing a remote option if current conditions in the city mandate that. It will be no surprise to you at all because we'll be in touch with you throughout. We will likely be hosting at least one more, if not a couple, town halls prior to any of those decisions. So we'll certainly be soliciting your input and working with you throughout the entire time. So John, I would love for you to walk us through what this means for our school as we plan not just for the next 6 weeks, but the next semester and year to come.
Absolutely, and thank you, Emily. Just one gentle correction, because there's a lot of information we're sharing here. You're going to know by October 1st what our plans are in terms of commencing, hopefully, hybrid instruction later that month. So stay tuned certainly for that date, and we'll be committed to letting families know well in advance around those decisions. As my colleague Jonathan mentioned, there are a lot of uncertainties about what's going to come next for our country, for the city of Philadelphia, and for our school. There's only so much that we can control in this environment. One thing I do want to emphasize in terms of orientation, when you come in to meet with school staff and pick up technology, and certainly for when children are able to return to school under a hybrid instructional model, is that we need you as partners in reinforcing those health and safety measures with your children and yourselves around arrival and dismissal, around mask wearing, around social distancing. Our team at the school is going to do everything that they can to reinforce and help train and adapt children to those procedures. You as families can also reinforce that in ways where our partnership around health and safety is as strong as our partnership is around instruction and academic progress in your children's social and emotional learning. In terms of what might happen in the school, as Jonathan mentioned, we might have someone in the school test positive. We hope we won't. Could be a child, could be a staff member. And in that instance, we'll follow all the appropriate protocols around notifying you, but also around either a partial closure of a group, a portion of the school. So kids, for example, in one classroom, who would probably then have to self-quarantine for a period of about 2 weeks, as would staff members who've been in contact with that group of children. If there's a more widespread school-based outbreak, and we of course hope there won't be, the whole school might have to close for a period of time. And then, of course, completely beyond our control, if the health situation on the ground in Philadelphia changes around some of these key data points that I was sharing earlier around the spread of the virus, if there's an upsurge, all schools in Philadelphia might be required to shift to fully virtual for a period of time. I say that not to create anxiety among any of you. We're all feeling enough anxiety in this time, but just to be honest with you about the things we can control and the things that we can't, and that we're all learning to adapt. We will do our best to problem solve with you, to communicate with you, to make sure that we can give your child the best services we possibly can within that context. And the thing to end this portion of our presentation before we shift to answering some questions that have come up is eventually this is going to end, right? Eventually there will be a vaccine. Eventually the virus will dissipate and we'll be able to go back to normal. So our challenge right now is to do the best job we can on behalf of your children until we reach that point in time. And this is probably it in terms of my comments tonight. I just want to thank you for the trust that you're putting in us and for sticking with us during this time. And I'm going to hand it over to Emily Fernandez, again, our Chief Schools Officer, to lead us through a few frequently asked questions.
Okay, thank you, John, and thank you everyone for staying on through this presentation. We know it is a lot to contemplate, and we want to take a moment to just name and answer some of the common questions we've been receiving so far. One thing I want to name, and folks have been using the chat function, so thank you. Please do feel free to send questions through the chat. We, as the panelists, are receiving them. And either we will be able to answer them during the presentation or in a chat back to you, or we will be collecting them. We're collecting all of them and be able to write back to you directly via email or in a follow-up communication from the school. So in one way or another, your question will be answered. So feel free to use the chat function as we go through this next section. So why did you design the remote days like this? Why did you design the schedule in this way? And Alyssa, I'm going to ask you to take the lead here.
Yeah, so the first is we were really lucky, for those of you who were with us this past spring, we were really lucky to have had that time to build out and refine our program. So we used input from you all, input from our staff to think about the elements to bring into this this year. But first and foremost, the age of our students really matter here. And so I know that a number of you have likely heard about different models from different places. Given how young our students are, we know that they have to have active support from their teacher. As our students get older, and as you know, our first and second graders, you will have noticed and you will notice in your schedule, there are more opportunities for asynchronous learning, but knowing that our students are really building the foundational skills for all of their learning, it was really important for us to build in as much synchronous live instruction as possible. We also have really had the opportunity to leverage a ton of wonderful resources online that existed pre-COVID, and also were they got better and they were iterated to become just stronger remote platforms for students. And so we are really confident that given the situation, the combination of live instruction and high quality remote programs lends itself to a strong remote learning academy. The last thing I'll say about the why did we design our days like this is we also know that students need breaks. And so those breaks were thoughtfully designed between classes. And then there are going to be cases where kids need more breaks than are in the schedule. We encourage that. You can expect to work really closely with teachers to make sure that kids have a schedule that works best for them, that promotes learning.
Thank you. The last piece I'll add to that is the note about the online learning platforms. You know, I think all educators for years have been talking about how to integrate technology and how to make the most out of the technology innovations around our country. And frankly, we might not have done the best that we could as an educational community. And so in some ways, this has pushed us to really learn, use, and maximize the educational technology, the learning platforms that are out there. And so we're really excited, even our learnings from the spring, to bring you a strong program this fall. All right, how will my student be graded during the remote learning option? And I'll take this to start. So as we said, all of our programming is aligned to the programming that our students had before March this past year, and aligned to what will be coming next. So we are continuing to use assessment both in the traditional form, be it written work or completed work that is submitted through a learning platform, and also more innovative forms, including online assessments and interactive assessments. What we can commit to you is that we will be in frequent communication with you, teachers and families, administration and families, about your students' progress. And so everything from remote back to school night to family conferences, we are going to be doing the communication so you know where your students' academic progress is across the course of the year. Alyssa, do you want to just add anything to that?
Yeah, what I'll add is we know that we are not going to get the same type of data that we would in school. What we also know is there are ways for us to gather really, really important information that reflect where your student is, where your child is, that also can inform how teachers are teaching and maybe the targeted support that individual students will need. So an example here that I would give for those rising second graders that joined us in our remote reading camp, what we learned is that we were able to administer reading assessments, which is an authentic experience where a child has a book, they're reading to their teacher and then having a conversation about what was happening. And what we learned is that kids were growing in their reading similarly to how they were growing in person. And so we are really hopeful and excited about some of that learning that happened in the spring and then also the summer.
It's so exciting to start to get that preliminary data because, we want kids to be academically growing and learning. And so it's possible. We just have to be creative and persistent and partner with families in order to do it. All right, behavior and student culture support. So there's a good amount of research and talk out there now about how we've all kind of experienced a really traumatic moment in time in the past 5 months. We know it's been difficult for families, and there's a growing body of research and writing about the social emotional effects for kids from isolation or academic learning loss. And so we're grounding our approach to students in trauma responsive practices. And so we're just beginning to learn that full pedagogy about understanding the effects of living through a traumatic time and what it means for kids, particularly our youngest kids. But we're reading, we're learning, and we're grounding it in that. We're also continuing to lean heavily on responsive classroom. We are a responsive classroom school. We believe in holding students to high expectations with love and warmth and consistency and teaching. And so that will be core to how we handle everything from, a misbehavior or a poor choice on the Zoom class to anything else that we encounter. Our approach to behavioral and student culture support is going to be grounded in those principles. What's really exciting is our leadership team and our culture support team that is going to be working with your students and families this year. And so I know that many of you have met Ms. Nakai Pullen, who joined us as our Dean of Culture, just an absolute star. And so she, along with our full team of leadership members, and of course, all of our students are going to be teachers are going to be supporting your children in making the best possible choices, even in this complex moment and structure.
What I'd like to add here is in the remote learning packets, one of the reasons we are including that card that says, this is how I feel with the different colors, is really to support this. And so responsive classroom, morning meeting, and closing circle have always been a part of our model, but we really want to provide even more instruction in how do we build skill to talk about our feelings. So when we think about behavior, sometimes overly positive, right? Overly excited, and also behavior that can be challenging. A lot of times it's really around communication. And so even in this remote learning model, we want to provide students with the opportunity to learn the communication skills around, this is how I feel, this is what I need. And I want to thank our families this past year. Some of that was inspired by you all. When we got messages during the school year, when we said, can someone please tell me what a peace corner is? My child has set one up at home. And so that really inspired some of this work that we are doing as we shift to remote.
That's beautiful. Okay, Alyssa, I'm going to ask you to step in right again here around uniform. I know you mentioned this earlier, but if you can just take us through this one more time.
Yep, of course. So this is a question that we have received from a number of families, understandably so. Does my student need to wear a uniform in remote learning? So I would like to reground us in the #1 rule for our virtual rules for global citizens, so that we're really going to ask and solicit support from you all in, and I am ready to learn. And so we know that for our youngest students in particular, we need to create an environment and set up the conditions for them to feel like they are shifting their mind to school, which again is no simple feat, and we totally acknowledge how challenging this has been for you all. So in advance, we just want to acknowledge you and appreciate the support that you will be providing with us in our partnership. So we do encourage families to lean on our uniform because based on input from this past year and what we saw, uniforms do help kids feel like they're in school and also build a sense of community, right? Especially for our students who are in kindergarten, our students who are newly joining us. It does provide some identity for kids and knowing we're all kids and we're all students at Philadelphia Hebrew Public. We also recognize that for some families, you may not have access and be able to purchase a uniform at this time. That is also okay. If you are in this situation, what we do ask is that you, again, stay grounded in being prepared and ready to learn. And so we ask that you avoid things like pajamas and costumes, because that can be distracting, not only for your child's learning, but the learning of everyone else in their community.
Thank you. And you know, for our last question that we have prepared for you all, will you take attendance? I'm going to turn it back to you, Alyssa, and as well, Emily Hurst, if you want to add anything here just about how we'll be accounting for students' attendance in this 100% remote model.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So as I shared earlier, we are still working with our network peers to publish an attendance policy. What I can share right now is that we will be doing period by period attendance. That data is going to be really important for us to see who is logging in, what families and students may need support, and then also we'll inform the potential shifts we will make to make sure that our schedule is working for as many students and families as possible. Emily, can you share a little bit about where we are in terms of guidance?
Yeah, I think like a lot of things, there is constantly new guidance coming out. So actually this week, Pennsylvania Department of Education published a number of new items of guidance around attendance, around recommended school openings, around the triggers to close a classroom or a whole school. So we are rapidly digesting all of that, and then we'll be reviewing our attendance policy. This is information that you will be getting very clearly in family orientation, and so we want to be really upfront with you on that. And then we're also going to be working with you closely during orientation and then throughout the school year to adjust. We know that this is a tremendous challenge for families as you're managing childcare, other children in the home, and your own work schedules. And so we are here to try to figure this out with you. I have seen a number of questions come in around childcare, and to echo what John said earlier, this is something we are actively investigating. We have 2 partners right now that we are interviewing and figuring out if we could have a more formalized partnership to offer childcare when we are not in the school building. So that would either be potentially when we're in virtual for the first 6 weeks of school, and for when we shift to hybrid on the days when your students would not be in school. So more information is coming on that, and we will communicate with you on that front as soon as possible to, of course, support robust attendance as much as we certainly can.
Yeah, the only thing that I'd like to add here, there are a couple of questions, and I know, John, thank you for responding to our attendees around answering those. We will certainly get back to you. There have been a few questions in the chat, and then also folks, families who have reached out to us about just support around how do I make this work for my child and family? How do I engage my student when things feel hard? And so what I want to share with you all is that you are not alone. This is a shared experience, and so we will be leaning on things like our neighborhood networks. Really excited to hear about how many of you have already requested to be part of that. A lot of this will be supporting one another to problem solve around the challenges that are shared. So, you know, even those moments of you having a child or a moment with your child where they don't want to log in, one, I can assure you, sometimes that happens at school. If we were in person, there are moments where kids are not feeling it, and that is all okay, and it's supporting them to build skill to be able to persist through that. But I also know that you all have done wonderful work with your kids in the past couple of months, and I'm really confident in that partnership being able to work through some of those challenges.
Okay, well, I know we are a little bit over time. You all are busy and I'm sure have dinner and bedtime ahead of you. So thank you for joining us. You've also submitted great questions. And I know we haven't been able to get to all of them. So thank you for your patience. What we are going to do now is go through these all. If we didn't get back to you, Roger did put a chat in there. Please send us an email with your question. That will help us make sure that we either get back to you with an individual response if we can't tell who you are by the name on your Zoom ID, or if it's a question that we're seeing really frequently, we will include it in an FAQ that we'll send out tomorrow night. So again, tomorrow night you'll receive a calendar, a recording of this session, and frequently asked questions to the best of our ability as we digest all of these guidance to make sure that we're in constant touch. Thank you for joining us tonight. Have a good night, and we will be in touch with you tomorrow. Can't wait to see you all very soon.